Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. Alright, I'd like to open up real quickly to say thank you for everybody who has supported me on my Patreon. And if you want to support or check it out, I'll put a link in the description below. It really means a lot. I really appreciate it. Now, this is my long, rambling thoughts style review of Awakened Realms Etherfields. So, grab yourself a beverage, grab yourself a snack, and kick back because I've got a lot of things to say about Etherfields. In Twin Peaks The Return, David Lynch as Gordon Cole tells the other characters and really the audience about a dream that he had. And in his dream, he meets Monica Bellucci. And Monica Bellucci is not playing a character, she is playing Monica Bellucci. He clearly states that in my dream, I met Monica Bellucci. And she had this to say to David Lynch's character: "We are like the dreamer who dreams and then lives inside the dream. But who is the dreamer?" And that sentence, that quote, really solidified the themes of Twin Peaks The Return, and really solidifies the themes that David Lynch has been working on for almost his entire career. Now, David Lynch is my all-time favorite artist in any medium. And for those of you who have not explored his films, but you are into Etherfields, I highly recommend that you watch some of his movies, because I think you're going to see a lot of similarities, especially in something like Eraserhead, which was his kind of first major motion picture that he made when he was pretty young. And then his really probably his most famous movie, Mulholland Drive, very much a dream-like film. And then moving on into Twin Peaks, which Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is my favorite movie from David Lynch. And Twin Peaks The Return, the series, is my favorite thing, period. I mean that. It's my favorite non-living thing ever made. And I thought a lot about that and a lot about David Lynch while I was playing Etherfields, especially that quote from Monica Bellucci. It's actually a fact that David Lynch's brilliant autobiography is actually called Room to Dream. And he's been interested in dreams and dream logic and just the kind of primal forces that dreams represent. That's just something that he has been absolutely obsessed with his entire career. And I think it does a lot of good to think about that while we are playing Etherfields, because I do think that this game is going to have something to say that has some meaning. So, if you want to know more about how the game is played or some basic, just basic stuff about the game, please watch my first video. Hold on, I gotta walk over here to turn off the heat. It's gonna get hot in here. Please watch the first video in this series. If you are interested in seeing a lot of the components without any regard to any spoilers, and really there aren't really spoilers because there's no context given, so you're just seeing art really, watch the second part of this series. If you want to just hear my thoughts gushing out about this game, this is the part that you want to watch. So I love dreamlike things. I love surrealism. I like magical realism. All things ranging from books to movies, cinema, art. Dreamlike things, when done right, are super compelling to me. Dream logic and dream spaces have inspired the writings of people like Lord Dunsany. There's actually a Lord Dunsany quote in the rulebook. So when I saw that quote in the rulebook, I was like, okay, this game is speaking to people like me. Dreams have inspired the works of H.P. Lovecraft, and my favorite work from Lovecraft, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. Dreams have inspired the work of Clark Ashton Smith, J.M. McDermott, Jeff Vandermeer, Michael Sisko. You have filmmakers like David Lynch with Mulholland Drive. I already went over those. With filmmakers like Marc Caro and Jean-Pierre Jeunet with City of Lost Children and Delicatessen. Jodorowsky with Holy Mountain. Musicians like The Caretaker. The Caretaker is the perfect music to listen to while playing Etherfields. The Caretaker's music sounds like you're listening to somebody listening to old-timey jazz far away. And it is the best music, period, to listen to while playing Etherfields. I'm going to put a link to a couple of his albums in the description below. You know, you have musicians like Dead Can Dance, which they are also quoted in the rulebook. The Cocteau Twins, Tim Buckley, and then artists like Francis Bacon, Bosch, and Dolly. These artists create works of surrealism, magical realism, dream pop, phantasmagoria. And when done right, these things are not just presented as a random selection, a random series of events, of scenarios. It's just like, you know, kind of like weird to be weird, just a series of random sounds and images. There's a logic to the dream logic, one that can be deciphered, one that has meaning that people can decode, and a logic that, while surreal isn't simply weird to be weird. And I think Etherfields is an example of that. If anything, Etherfields is, I would classify it as a work of weird interactive fiction, of a work of new weird fiction in a board game form. Now, the new weird is kind of like it's a progression of weird fiction back from the pulp days, and two people who were instrumental in getting the new weird kind of school off the ground were Anne and Jeff Vandermeer, and this was one of their early anthologies of new weird fiction. And so you have some of the major players here: China Mayelville, Kath Koja, KJ Bishop, M. John Harrison, Clive Barker, Jeffrey Ford, Michael Moorcock. So very interesting stuff. You also have people like, you know, like Michael Sisko and Thomas Ligotti, but the Vandermeers are really interesting. And if you're looking for some interesting books to explore after playing Etherfield, I highly suggest anything put together by them. Also, if you're interested in the way that artists create these kinds of worlds, and Etherfields really is a fully realized, created world, I cannot recommend enough this book by Jeff Vandermeer called Wonderbook, The Illustrated Guide to Creating Imaginative Fiction. While this book is primarily focused and made for writers, I also think that this is a great book for people interested in game design and any kind of creative medium where a world is important. This book is incredible. It has so much great art, so much great information, with contributions by all of the people you're going to see there, and really like important people in the field of new weird fiction. And it also just has so many great ideas, so many great pieces of art, and things for creators to think about while they are creating their worlds and their characters, and the important things that go into these shared experiences. And so I really think that this book could also speak to people who are into games a lot, because these are shared worlds. We are living in these spaces that these creators have made. And I think that the more we know about how these kinds of things are created, the more we can appreciate them. And yeah, this book is fantastic. And I mean, some of the art in here looks like it's straight out of this game. So this was another thing that I was thinking about quite often while I was playing Etherfields. So Etherfields is not a perfect game. I had some criticisms and I pointed those out in my first video. And some people on BGG have accused me of being too critical, but I don't think I am. I think it is the role of the critic to point out flaws because we want things to be better. And so, as I mentioned before, the board is just an absolute disaster for, especially for solo players playing in a small space. I haven't used the board once. I haven't missed it. I will probably never even use it. You can play this game just fine without it. And if you're playing solo in a small space like I am, just get used to playing without it. The only thing on the board that the board actually does for you is there is a tracker to keep track of some time, and I just use a D6 and it works just as well. I also have a feeling that I was right when I thought that the board was kind of a last minute change. In the game, there's this letter from the designers, and they actually mention some things you're going to be getting with the game. And they actually say, you know, some of the new things are a bigger, improved board. That really leads me to believe that the board was redesigned really late in the process, because the board that they showed throughout the Kickstarter campaign was way more functional and usable. And so, yeah, I'm not sure. It was a really, really poor design. The onboarding is rough. Developers and publishers, I really think you guys need to start realizing that the game experience doesn't start when the game is set up, and it doesn't end when the game is over. The game experience starts from the moment the player opens the box until the moment they pack everything away. And as soon as, more developers need to realize that and make the entire process of opening the box, getting things set up, getting things organized, learning, playing, getting things put back in the box, all of that is the game experience. All too often, especially with Kickstarter games, the focus is purely on that part where you're playing the game. And I fully believe that that needs to be extended. And I know that I caught some flack for that on BGG, but I stand by that. I think the book of scripts could be better organized. I really think it would be better to have the scripts grouped by dream, by scenario, so that it's easier to go back and reread some of the things that you have encountered in case you missed something. Because this is a game that it's really easy to miss a small detail, like one particular card that you might need to add to one of your decks or something. And if you miss that little piece of information, I think you could actually get stuck in this game, and it's very easy to do. So if they organized the book of scripts by dream instead of just completely random, it would be much easier to go, okay, what was the last dream I went? Okay, dream number 10, look in the book, and then you could just read through those sections to make sure you didn't miss something. During the tutorial, while the tutorial is super interesting and it totally got me on board for this game like no other tutorial ever has, I think they really need to stress that you should interact with every single space in the tutorial, because it is really easy to miss one thing, and that thing could completely hamper every game going forward. So while you're playing the tutorial, really explore every space. Don't worry about losing the tutorial. Just explore every space so you don't miss that one thing. But once I got over those initial hurdles, I fell in love with this game. This game just offers up a wealth of incredible experiences, of things that I have not encountered, emotions that I haven't encountered in a board game before. This is the game that I wanted Seventh Continent to be. This is the game that I wanted Time Stories to be. It has a similar kind of exploration that Seventh Continent does, but it doesn't require me to constantly be going in and out of the box looking for more cards to set up. While it does do some of that, most of the setup is done before the game, before each scenario, and then most of the cleanup is done after. It also has a similar vibe to Time Stories with its puzzle solving and strong artistic direction, but the trial and error isn't as strong. There is some trial and error. I did fail one of the dreams, and it was really because I had to waste time searching for the right places. I went back into the dream and beat it like super easy because I knew exactly what I needed to do, and I was able to progress. But you're not resetting the whole campaign. You're not resetting the whole adventure like you are in Time Stories. You're just resetting a little component, a little compartmentalized scenario. So it's not that big of a time waste. I think the main thing that this game does well is its sense of exploration. And it does a lot of that through the creation of the worlds. One of my favorite books of all time, this at one time was my favorite book. I used to read this book every year, probably for about 15 years. From Alan Lightman, is Einstein's Dreams. And this is a book like Einstein is talking with a friend, and Einstein is just describing to his friend a bunch of dreams that he had. And I like this one in particular from April 26th, 1905. In this world, it is instantly obvious that something is odd. No houses can be seen in the valleys or plains. Everyone lives in the mountains. At some time in the past, scientists discovered that time flows more slowly the farther from the center of Earth. The effect is minuscule, but it can be measured with extremely sensitive instruments. Once the phenomenon was known, a few people anxious to stay young moved to the mountains. Now all houses are built on Dom, the Matterhorn, Monte Rosa, and other high ground. It is impossible to sell living quarters elsewhere. Many are not content simply to locate their homes on a mountain. To get the maximum effect, they have constructed their houses on stilts. The mountaintops all over the world are nested with such houses, which from a distance look like a flock of fat birds squatting on long, skinny legs. People more eager to live longest have built their houses on the highest stilts. Indeed, some houses rise half a mile on their spindly wooden legs. Height has become status. When a person from a kitchen window looks up to see a neighbor, he believes that neighbor will not become stiff in the joints as soon as he, will not lose his hair until later, will not wrinkle until later, will not lose the urge for romance as early. Likewise, a person looking down on another house tends to dismiss its occupants as spent, weak, and short-sighted. So I like this book just because of the way it describes so many interesting dream worlds and so many places I want to explore. And Etherfields does that in spades. I've never been more excited to flip a new card than I am playing Etherfields. Now, I'm not going to flip through cards because I want to keep this actual review discussion as spoiler-free as possible for people. But every single time I get to draw a new card, it's always exciting. There's always something new to discover. The game's drip feed of new things is pretty well paced. It starts off a little slow, but each step forward, you start to reveal more and more. You kind of get this snowballing effect. And soon you're adding cards to like every deck. You're adding cards to your Slumber map. You're adding cards to your Slumber encounters. You're adding flaw, fate, turn, or not turn cards, but item cards. You're adding note cards that you have to refer to at certain points. You're adding cards to decks in the box, like to your item market and to your character deck, your influence cards. And it really feels like everything you do, you are slowly progressing. And I really like that. The game is almost constantly throwing new ideas and mechanisms at you, new little ways to manipulate the play area, new ways to interact with the world. I mean, I've done stuff like in one mission, you are rotating cards to complete a map or to complete a maze. In one encounter, you are having to manipulate the way an enemy moves around and does certain things. In one instance, you are searching through darkness to try to find items. It's every dream I've played so far has had something new and exciting. And what's more, the game world actually reacts to the things that you do. I've met NPCs and had encounters with a couple or with a certain creature that later on, when I meet them again, it's going to remember. The game is going to remember because I have this note card and I have a clue of how to interact with them. I'm going to have to go back into mazes or to dream gates. So these are the different dreams that I have available to explore now. I'm going to be able to go back to some of them and possibly find different ways to interact with some of the things, because I'm going to be approaching those with new information and new items that I'm going to be able to unlock. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of like a Metroidvania video game, like Castlevania or Metroid, where you can see a door, but you can't unlock that door yet until you come back with the right item. And so it's enticing. You're like, oh man, how do I get over there? Okay, do I have what I need? Can I go back to this world now and maybe manipulate it in some other way? You have to remember things. It's good to write things down while you're playing this game because there is a lot of visual and narrative information to remember. And it also has a bit of a roguelike feel. So the roguelike video game genre is a genre that you do runs. And each run you start from zero and you go from zero to hero. In the new modern ones, you are slowly building up progress as you reset each time. And this has that as well because you're going to be going on this overworld map. So the overworld map, I've added a couple tiles too. And as you're exploring, you're going to be picking up keys to go into other dreams. Now, you might be able to get your keys, but by the time you finally make it to the dream, your character might be beat up a little bit. You might have some flaws in your deck. You might have taken some damage. You might have sealed some cards that you can't use. And so you have to make a choice. Okay, am I prepared to go into that dream now, or should I reset? If you reset, you do a thing called the awakening, where you go back to a central spot on the map, and you kind of like reset your character to go out and try again. Additionally, there is a card in the Slumber deck called the Delta, The Delta Phase. And that is also another way that you can kind of reset your progress a little bit to make it a little bit easier going forward. And that's going to come through every cycle. And once you complete this, it's called a dream cycle. And so you want to keep track of how many slumber encounters you have until you get to hit that delta phase again. So it's important to keep that in mind. So there is some of that kind of resource management in the game. The Slumber deck contains a ton of encounters, and I've added quite a few. Some of them are NPCs. There are ways to react to them violently or non-violently. And just like every time I add a new card to that Slumber deck, I am excited to encounter it. Things in that Slumber deck become familiar over time, and that's how this game's world is. And that's what I mean, that this game feels like it's in a living, breathing world, because things start to become familiar, and you go, oh, like I need to experience that. I remember this character. What did he say? He told me something about my fate, and I really started to feel like I was living in this interesting world. So another book that I was thinking about while playing this is J.M. McDermott's Last Dragon. This is my single favorite work of fantasy, like my single favorite volume fantasy work. I think this book is a masterpiece, and it's pretty much the book that I judge all other modern fantasy by. Um, I'm going to read a little bit from it. My fingers are like spiders drifting over memories in my webbed brain. The husks of the dead gaze up at me, and my teeth sink in, and I speak their ghosts. But it's all mixed up in my head. I can't separate lines from lines or people from people. Everything is in this web, Asumi, even you, even me. Slowly, the meat falls from the bones until only sunken cheeks and empty space between the filaments remind me that a person was there in my head. The ghosts all fade the same way. They fade together. Your face fades into the face of my husband and the dying screams of my daughter. Asumi, your face is Seth's face and the face of the golem. So wonderfully written. J.M. McDermott's prose style he's such a fantastic writer. I cannot recommend this book enough. And part of me is just a little disappointed in the prose style, or the prose, just the execution of the prose of Etherfields. It's okay. It's more than serviceable. It ranges from okay to pretty great, but it's nowhere near the quality of a great novelist. I really wish that hopefully someday we can get to the point where board game writing is at that quality of level of something like J.M. McDermott. I understand that Awakened Realms, they translate their games. I think their games are originally done in Polish. So there's translation issues, and that's always difficult. So I appreciate the difficulties. And they also have to translate their games into many different languages. And they're not novelists. They're not expert, professional novelists. And so I understand that. So even with saying that, the way this game is written, I think is pretty good. But it more than just that, it is interesting. It is compelling. This game has made me think about its story more so than any other board game I've played. And where that really shines is in the art, design, and presentation that does a fantastic job of creating the world. While some works of fiction rely just on words to create their worlds, and I would point to like Clive Barker as kind of being like one of the best at that, at creating worlds and painting pictures through words. And with Imajica being just a premier example of that. If you guys have not read Imajica and you are into fantastic worlds at all, I highly, highly recommend Imajica. It is a long book at nearly 1,000 pages, but it is more than worth it. If you want to go into something a little shorter to wet your whistle a little bit, The Thief of Always is also awesome. And it also, Clive Barker, besides being a great writer, is also a really good artist. And he did the illustrations for this book. And some of them actually did remind me quite a bit of some of the art in Etherfields. While I was playing, I was thinking about Clive Barker quite a bit. I mean, especially there are these masks right there, right? There's a part, yeah, that's right. I wanted to, so Henry wasn't interested in the clothes. It was the masks that mesmerized him. They were like snowflakes, no two alike. Some were made of wood and plastic, some of strong cloth and paper mache. Some were as bright as parrots, others as pale as parchment. Some were so grotesque he was certain that they'd been carved by crazy people. Others so perfect they looked like death masks of angels. Oh, death masks. J. McDermott has a great short story called Death Mask and Eulogy. I highly recommend reading as well. There were masks of clowns and foxes, masks like skulls decorated with real teeth, and one with carved flames instead of hair. So, I mean, speaking of masks, what you've been seeing on this board here are some of the masks that your characters will be wearing in the game. And so, yeah, a lot of Clive Barker reminds me of that. It also reminds me a lot of Sandman. in that sense that, you know, the art is super important to telling the story. I was talking to a friend on Facebook about just how crazy the art budget must have been for this game, because there is so much art in this game and so much of it is absolutely incredible. I can't get over how the art has impacted me as a player in this game. And I'm pretty sure that in the world that there are colors that you want to pay attention to, and this kind of goes back to the whole dream logic thing. There is a particular color that I've noticed being used in certain situations, and as a player I'm wanting to explore things that have that color more than others because I think it's going to lead me to interesting places. And I'm really hoping that the game maintains that kind of consistency of logic so that it's not just random things that have to do with trial and error. I'm hoping that as you start to discover things in the story through the written words and through the images, that you are actually able to put together the clues to solve the overall mystery of the game. So one thing I haven't talked a lot about are the mechanisms, and they're fine. The moment-to-moment gameplay is relatively simple. You know, your character is presented by a miniature and a deck of cards. You can buy new cards to add to your deck at certain points. The cards in your deck grant you special powers, and you have 3 different types of currency: green, yellow, and red, that you spend to overcome challenges. You have a collection of items. So I've found quite a few items that I have in my stash. At certain points of the game, you're able to restore up to 3 items, and those are the 3 items you can use until you reset or until they get discarded. And then you have your mask that has special powers. So one thing I really like is that the designers encourage solo players from the beginning to only play one hero. Or they encourage you to play one hero. They discourage you to multi-hand. This is a true solo lone wolf game, and I really appreciate that. The game seems balanced for this in a number of ways. Mainly, you can have a few extra turns with more than one player, and you don't have to have as many successes on certain challenges. You can switch between characters when you reset, and I've had to do that already because my first character I was playing already got 3 flaws in her deck, and flaws just clog up your deck with bad things. I have now discovered a reliable way to get rid of flaws, so when I reset the game up, I'm going to reset, and I'm going to take her out of the box, and I'm going to go through now with her to try to work on getting her flaws taken out of her deck. I've played 2 different characters so far, and they've both been pretty different in the way that their special powers work. One of them is able to create this pocket dimension that I can go in to do different things to help me on the adventure and then to teleport to different spaces. This is one of the coolest special powers I've ever seen in a board game. I mean, it comes with its own tile for a map. Just when I pulled that out, I was wow. Like I said, every time I explore a new tile, a new card in this game, it's been a wow moment. There are a lot of moving pieces, and if you thrive on playing perfectly by the rules as written, hitting every little detail, you might find yourself bogged down and forgetting certain details and rules. I'm trying to play as close to possible as the rules is written, but if I forget something, I try not to worry about it, and I just try to progress. It usually balances out. I usually forget something that hurts me and something that helps me. So, I'm not cheating, but I'm not being super concerned about every little rule until after I'm done with the dream, and then I'll go back and reread the rule book and make sure that I am doing it right. There is a good FAQ offered up on by Awaken Realms, and it goes through and it details things that says the difficulty levels seemed high for me. Am I doing something wrong? And it just goes through a whole bunch of stuff to keep in mind. Like, are you doing this? Do you remember to do this? Do you remember to take advantage of this? I highly recommend you print that out and read that if you're having trouble with the game. So, the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath from H.P. Lovecraft, I think this would be a kind of a major influence on this game. There is a quote from Lovecraft in the book, or in the rule book, and you are also getting silver keys in the game eventually. And this says, when Randolph Carter was 30, he lost the key of the Gate of Dreams. All right, so these are called dream gates, and you need keys to open them. So, yeah. Prior to that time, he had made up for the prosiness of life by nightly excursions to strange and ancient cities beyond space and lovely, unbelievable garden lands across ethereal seas. But as middle age hardened upon him, he felt those liberties slipping away little by little, until at last he was cut off altogether. No more could his galley sail up the river of Ocaronus, past the gilded spires of Thrawn, or his elephant caravans tramp through perfumed jungles in Cled, where forgotten palaces with veined ivory columns sleep lovely and unbroken under the moon. That pretty much sums up some of the feelings, some of the atmosphere of Etherfields perfectly. And of course, Lovecraft was inspired by Lord Dunsany, who also wrote some dream fiction, as did the Lynn Carter in his Samrana cycle, which is a really cool collection of dream-inspired fiction. So, Etherfields, I cannot vouch for the whole game. I've been playing it pretty much every free moment I have this week. I think I have explored enough to pass judgment. I don't know if maybe I'm one mission away from the entire game falling apart. Maybe there's an error in one of the cards or the book of scripts that is going to stop me dead in my tracks and prevent me from progressing, and it's going to be too hard to find out where I went wrong. I don't know. It's hard to say. I can't speculate on that. All I can say is right now, based on what I have played and based on the seeds of what I have seen, how they have planted in my mind, they've made me want to explore this game and discover what else this game has in store for me. So all I can vouch for are the hours I've spent with the game this past week, the things I've experienced, and the way those hours and the way those things have made me feel. And right now, I am absolutely loving Etherfields. I am so eager to play this game. I can't play it fast enough. I'm mad that I have to slow down. I'm that I have to spend time going through it, because I want to see. I constantly want to see the next dream gate, the next place I'm going to explore. Is it going to be the mysteries of Swamp Hill, or wait, who lives in my house? The basements are calling. I've already discovered the epilogue for this first campaign, and I know I'm ways away from that. Return to the Sunshine Days. There are all these new places and new things to explore and new characters to meet and new experiences to have, and that's really what this game does so wonderfully, is offer up those beautiful dreamlike experiences that I get from the movies of David Lynch, from books like Last Dragon, and from artists like Clive Barker and Alan Lightman. The music from people like the Caretaker and the Cocteau Twins, all this dream pop kind of stuff. Dead Can Dance, Tim Buckley, This Mortal Coil. So I'm pretty sure this game was kind of made. It's like, if I had to, I could say that did they sneak into my brain and make a game exactly for me? And I know that's ludicrous, but it feels like that, because it is just hitting all of the right notes. And that was nearly 40 minutes of non-stop rambling discussion on Etherfield. So I hope I said something worthwhile in all that time. I can wholeheartedly recommend, if you didn't back this game and you like any of the things I mentioned, you like exploration in games, you like the idea of Seventh Continent and time stories, you like games with big, interesting worlds and things to do and explore, I cannot recommend this game enough. The Pledge Manager is reopened. Just get the base game. If you order this base game, you get the Kickstarter version. and you'll get the stretch goals, and it'll be delivered sometime next year. You know, just if you can work with the board, great. If you can't, just play without. Just know that you're going to be stumbling a little bit to get going. Don't worry so much about it. Just pay attention to the details in that script book. Make sure you don't miss one little item. And you know, just take your time and learn it. And I think pretty soon it'll come as second nature, and you will just be able to dive in and start exploring and living in this wonderful, wonderful dream world of Etherfields. Sorry guys, well I hope you enjoyed the video, and congratulations if you made it to the end. We'll talk to you later guys. Bye bye.